They say revenge is a dish best served cold. They're wrong. Revenge is a vintage wine, aged for a decade in a cellar of silence, waiting for the perfect moment to be uncorked. She left him on a rainy Tuesday in October, the kind of relentless Chicago downpour that washes the grit from the streets and turns the city into a smudged watercolor of neon lights. It was a gray, forgettable day, the kind that shouldn't have mattered. But for me, Alex, that was the day time split in two, before and after. I'd just survived a mind-numbing meeting, my head still buzzing with blueprints and budget projections. I'm a junior architect at a small firm tucked away in a brick alley off the Magnificent Mile. My dreams were skyscrapers. My reality was renovating brownstones. I pushed open the heavy glass door of the office, the chill of the air conditioning a ghost on my neck, and prepared to face the deluge. And then I saw it. A bassinet. A pristine white one, the expensive model my wife, Isabella, had insisted on, sitting squarely in front of the door. It was absurdly out of place in the wet, grimy alley. Rain hammered the plastic awning above, spattering the sides of the bassinet, but inside, a mint green wool blanket remained perfectly dry. For a second, my brain refused to process the image. A mistake, a cruel prank. I stepped closer, rainwater dripping from my hair onto my shirt collar, and peered inside. A tiny, red face, fast asleep. Miniature lips worked silently. A fist no bigger than a walnut curled in the air before falling limp. Under the jaundiced glow of the office sign, I could see a swirl of soft black hair. My son, Leo. He was 6 months old. The air caught in my throat. My heart skipped a beat, then began to hammer against my ribs like a trapped bird. I scanned the alley. It was empty, filled only with the sound of the rain and the distant rumble of the L train. Where was Bella? Where the hell was she? I scooped him up. The blanket still smelled of her perfume, a cloying lily scent I had once loved. Now, it was a razor blade to the heart. I clutched my son, his warmth seeping through my thin shirt, a small, fragile existence in a cold, vast world. Inside the blanket, my fingers brushed against a folded piece of paper. It was stiff and sharp. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. Isabella's handwriting, elegant and flowing, but the words were as cold and cruel as steel. He's irritation when I asked about charges on our credit card. I had lied to myself, believed her flimsy excuses, hoped it was just postpartum stress. I was a fool. The rain seemed to wash away the last of my naivete. As I carried my son back into the office, slamming the door behind me, I was no longer Alex, the loving husband, the happy new father. I was a man abandoned, with a tiny life wholly dependent on me, and a slip of paper that held the ugliest of truths. My problem, my burden. Fine. I'll carry it. They came 2 days later. I was in our rented apartment in Lincoln Park, a small, cluttered space that now smelled of baby formula and diapers, a scent both foreign and hauntingly intimate. I hadn't slept in 48 hours. My eyes were sunken and raw. Leo, after screaming through the first night, had finally settled. He was in his crib, twitching in his sleep. The doorbell rang. A sharp, imperious sound. I knew who it was before I even looked through the peephole. Isabella's parents, the Caldwells. They stood under the flat yellow light of the hallway like statues carved from ice. Mr. Caldwell, tall and imposing, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, wore a silk shirt and expensive slacks. Mrs. Caldwell was draped in a designer scarf, a gold watch and jade bracelets glittering on her wrist. They didn't look at me like grandparents coming to see their grandson. They looked at me like creditors coming to foreclose on a bad debt. "May we come in?" Mrs. Caldwell's voice wasn't a question. It was a command. I stepped back, letting them enter. They brought the cold from outside with them, and the scent of an expensive, overpowering perfume that suffocated the smell of milk in the room. Their eyes swept over my apartment with undisguised contempt. The worn-out sofa, the stacks of old architecture books, and the simple wooden crib where their only grandchild lay. They didn't ask how Leo was. They didn't offer to help. They just stood there, two golden gods deigning to visit the mortal realm. "She's gone," Mrs. Caldwell said flatly, her voice as smooth and hard as marble. "We don't know where. We don't want to know." Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat, a dry, rasping sound. "The boy," he said, his gaze a dagger aimed at my chest, "is your burden now. Don't call us. Don't look for us. Consider Isabella to have never had a child, and us to have never had a grandson." The words were stones thrown at my face. Their cruelty was somehow more monstrous than Bella's abandonment. Bella had run for reasons I didn't yet understand. Selfishness, maybe, or desperation. But they were standing right here, perfectly lucid result of the mistake our daughter made in marrying you. No, thank you. A mistake. Our marriage, our love, our son. All of it just a mistake in their eyes. "We warned her," Mr. Caldwell continued, his voice a low drone, "that you weren't worthy, that you would drag her down. She sees that now. Better late than never." They turned to leave, as abruptly as they had arrived. Before the door closed, Mrs. Caldwell looked back at me one last time. "You will never understand our world, Alex. It's best you just accept your burden." The door clicked shut, severing everything. I stood in the silent room, the quiet now heavier than a baby's cry. I looked at the crib. Leo was awake, his big, dark eyes staring up at me. It was a pure look, free of judgment or blame. In that moment, a cold, furious rage ignited inside me. Not a hot, impulsive anger, but a slow, burning fire, stoked by their contempt and cruelty. They thought I would break. They thought I would beg. They thought I would discard my own son just as their daughter had. They had underestimated me, and they would pay for it. I walked to the window and looked down at the street below. The Caldwell's black Mercedes glided away from the curb, silent and arrogant. They had left me with my burden. But they didn't know that on the night Bella left, I found more than just the note. After I'd gotten Leo home, after the initial shock had subsided, I'd started clearing away Bella's things, trying to erase her presence. And then I saw it. On her vanity, half hidden by an eyeshadow palette, her old phone. She'd gotten a new one months ago, but had kept this one. She must have forgotten it. In a moment of weakness, I had turned it on. It wasn't password protected, and her social media, email, banking apps, all of them were still logged in. At the time, I hadn't looked. I'd turned it off and locked it in a drawer. I'd told myself to respect her privacy, to maintain one last shred of dignity. But now, after the Caldwell's visit, that dignity had been incinerated. Anger burns hot and fast. Revenge needs to be served cold. I took out the phone. This time, I didn't hesitate. 10 years pass like a blur when you're just trying to survive, and like a century when you're waiting. In those 10 years, my world shrank to the size of a boy named Leo. I raised him alone. I mixed his first formula and made his first school lunch. I held his hands for his first steps and held the back of his bike as he wobbled down the sidewalk. I taught him how to read, how to tie his shoes, how to fix a leaky faucet. We built a life. A simple life, often a struggle, but one filled with laughter and love. A life the Caldwells could never imagine I was capable of creating. They didn't see the nights I stayed up freelancing, my eyes burning from staring at a screen, just to keep a roof over our heads. My salary from the firm wasn't enough, so I took on side projects, working when the rest of the city was asleep. They didn't see the nights he ran a high fever, when I sat by his bedside, counting the seconds between his ragged coughs, my heart tight with a fear so primal it was suffocating. I learned to be a nurse, a chef, a teacher, and my son's best friend. They didn't see how bright, stubborn, and full of life he became. He had my eyes, but he had Bella's radiant smile, a cruel irony I faced every day. He was smart, curious, and had a kind heart. He was the best of me, and maybe the best of what Bella once was. They missed it all. They were ghosts in our life, until the day they decided they wanted him. The lawsuit arrived in a neat, cream-colored envelope, the paper thick and expensive. It came on a Friday afternoon, just as Leo and I got back from playing catch in the park. He was 10 now, sweaty and grinning, telling me all about a home run he'd hit in his Little League game. I opened the envelope, and the smile died on my lips. The words on the page were cold, legalistic. Petition for custody. They claimed I had willfully and maliciously kept them from their grandson, that I had poisoned his mind against them, that I was an unfit influence and incapable of raising a child properly. They painted a picture of me as a poor, bitter man, clinging to a child out of spite. When I finished reading, my hands were steady, because they had no idea what I had. The rage from 10 years ago had cooled into a diamond-hard resolve. That night, long after Leo was asleep, I opened the old metal filing cabinet in my home office. Inside, tucked between rolls of architectural drawings, was a lockbox. For 10 years, Isabella's old phone had been my secret window into a world of lies and betrayal. I hadn't been rash. I had taken my time, meticulously archived. Caldwell's had paid off more than once to keep quiet about his shady business dealings, and the most damning part, Mrs. Caldwell's signature was on the wire transfers. Mr. Caldwell's voice was on a recorded call instructing a fixer to make sure the problem went away. I was the problem. They hadn't just condoned their daughter's desertion. They had financed her lover and plotted to remove me from the picture. Maybe they just meant to threaten me, to ruin me professionally. I didn't know how far their plan had gone, because Bella had left before they could execute it. I had built the file, piece by piece, year after year. Every email, every text, every bank statement was printed, chronologically organized, and secured. When I had finally saved enough to hire a lawyer, my old college friend David, who now had his own practice, I gave him a copy. "Hold on to this, David," I told him. "Keep it sealed. Don't touch it until I give the word." David had looked at me, his eyes wide with shock after glancing at the first few pages. "Alex, this is more than a custody case. This is a nuke." "I know," I'd replied, "and I'll be the one to decide when to push the button." Now, the time had come. The family courtroom was suffocatingly formal, smelling of wood polish and old paper. The light from the tall windows was muted by heavy drapes, casting the room in a permanent state of twilight. I sat at one table with only David beside me. I wore my best suit, the one I kept for major presentations. It felt a little tight across the shoulders, a testament to the weight I'd been carrying for a decade. Across the room sat the enemy, the Caldwells, pristine and polished, flanked by a team of high-priced attorneys. They looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine, utterly alien to the raw human misery that usually filled this space. They didn't look at me, but I could feel their gaze, sharp and confident. Leo was in a waiting room down the hall with a social worker. I'd told him I had an important meeting and he needed to wait. He hadn't asked questions, just handed me a drawing he'd made. Superheroes with flowing capes. He was blissfully unaware of the war being waged over him. I intended to keep it that way. The Caldwell's lawyer began. He was a silver-haired man with a smooth, persuasive voice. He painted me as a bitter failure, a struggling father who couldn't give his son the future he deserved. He spoke of my small apartment, my modest job. He insinuated that I had kept Leo caged, away from the world of privilege and opportunity that only his wealthy grandparents could provide. "Your Honor," he concluded, his voice dripping with theatrical sincerity, "we are not here to punish Mr. Thorne. We are here because when you're holding a royal flush, the bluffs don't matter." David glanced at me, a flicker of worry in his eyes. I gave a slight shake of my head, telling him to stay calm. When it was my turn, I stood up. The room fell silent. All eyes were on me. I didn't look at the Caldwells. I looked directly at the judge, a middle-aged woman with a stern but intelligent face. I didn't say a word. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a thick, sealed manila folder. It was heavy in my hands, heavy with 10 years of patience and pain. I walked forward and placed the folder on the judge's bench. "Your Honor," I said, my voice clear and steady, "I believe everything you need is in here." The judge looked at me, then at the folder. She frowned, surprised by my move. She picked up a letter opener and sliced through the seal. She opened it. She read the first page, a copy of the note Bella had left. "He's your problem now." She turned to the second page, a bank statement from Mrs. Caldwell, showing a large wire transfer to Bella's lover. By the third page, a transcript of a text exchange between Bella and her mother, where Mrs. Caldwell advised her to cut all ties and start fresh. The judge's eyebrows had shot up. She leaned back in her chair and looked at me over the top of her reading glasses. "Mr. Thorne," she asked quietly, her voice just loud enough for me and the court reporter to hear, "do they have any idea you have this?" I just nodded. The rest of the hearing proceeded in absolute silence. The judge read, turning page after page. No one in the room moved. The only sound was the rustle of paper, a sound like the countdown on a time bomb. I watched the confidence drain from the Caldwells' faces, replaced by confusion, then dawning horror. Mrs. Caldwell began twisting her pearl necklace, a nervous tick. Mr. Caldwell leaned over and whispered harshly to his wife. She shook her head, her face pale. 10 minutes. 10 eternal minutes. Finally, the judge set the folder down. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. When she looked up, her expression was transformed. The professional sternness was gone, replaced by undisguised disgust. "This," she said, her voice laced with ice, "is deeply troubling." She turned to the Caldwell's attorney. "I strongly suggest your clients reconsider their petition. Proceeding may expose them to significant legal consequences well beyond the scope of family law." The lawyer's face was ashen. He was completely unprepared for this. He turned to his clients, whispering frantically. Mr. Caldwell's jaw was clenched, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. He was still defiant. The judge's gaze cut him in half. "Do you wish to continue?" The silence stretched, thick and heavy. The entire courtroom held its breath. Finally, after a long internal battle, Mr. Caldwell muttered a single word, the sound choked as if torn throat. "Withdrawn." The room emptied quickly. The Caldwell's legal team avoided my eyes, packing their briefcases with a haste that bordered on panic. They fled as if escaping a fire. Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell walked past me without a word. But as she passed, Mrs. Caldwell glanced at the folder in my hand as if it might detonate. It already had, just not in a way she could see. Outside in the hall, Leo ran to me and threw his arms around my waist. He held up his drawing. "It's us," he said, his voice bursting with pride. In the picture, I was wearing a cape, a superhero. I smiled, the first genuine smile of the day, and ruffled his hair. "I love it, buddy. It's the best." We walked to the parking garage. I buckled him into his booster seat and started the car. As I checked the rearview mirror, I saw them, the Caldwells, standing across the lot, watching us. Their faces were pale in the afternoon sun. They knew it wasn't over, because I still had a copy of every single page, and I had never promised to keep it quiet. People think revenge is about rage. It's not. It's about patience. It's about letting your enemies walk themselves into the trap you built a decade ago. They left a baby on my doorstep and told me he was my burden. They were right, but they never understood. He was also my reason, and now he was mine, forever. I pulled out of the garage and merged into the flow of city traffic. Leo was chattering in the back seat about his plans for the weekend. I listened, murmuring responses. In the rearview mirror, their figures grew smaller and smaller until they were gone. They wanted a war. They got one. But they brought a knife to a gunfight they didn't even know was happening. The folders sat on the passenger seat, a silent testament to the power I now held. I could destroy them. I could expose every one of their dirty secrets to the world. But looking at my son in the mirror, at his innocent, happy face, I knew I wouldn't. Not yet, anyway. Silence is its own form of power. Letting them live in fear, never knowing when the sword might fall, was a more exquisite punishment. They called Leo my burden. He was the sweetest, most sacred burden a man could ever have. He was the one who taught me the meaning of unconditional love, of sacrifice, of what it truly means to be a man. I'm no superhero, I'm just a father, and for my son, that was more than enough. The car moved toward our little apartment, toward the life we had built from the ashes of a great betrayal. And for the first time in 10 years, I felt truly, completely free.